Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel with yet again another movie review, and this is one I've been very excited to talk about ever since I heard about it in full, and that of course is Hundreds of Beavers, directed by Mike Cheslik, starring Ryland, Brickson, Tews as an Applejack salesman whose livelihood gets destroyed by a lot of beavers, you could say hundreds of them, and essentially this follows him trying to learn how to survive in the wilderness and eliminate these beavers. That's really the story at hand, and yet again, just watching the trailer for this, hearing about this movie in full, when I really started to see the reviews coming out, glowing reviews, I thought this was like some random documentary. I wasn't even looking into it, but I saw it at the Cinemapolis Theater, and I was looking at their schedule when I went up there before. I noticed it was on there. I didn't think much of it. I thought it was probably some weird documentary that's probably great, but nothing I need to seek out. But when I heard it was like not only a silent-esque film in the vein of Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, with so much amazing slapstick that's incredibly well timed and paced, and features so many jokes that are just so well set up and planted and pay it off. And the fact that this is literally essentially a movie where the beavers are played by men in beaver costumes or people in beaver costume, who knows, but yet again, just that very specific sort of description and explanation of a film like this is something that I was beyond excited for, and the fact that it was essentially being touted as a live-action Looney Tunes movie. All these things together really intrigued me because I'd really never heard or seen anything like this before. And after seeing Hundreds of Beavers, I can certainly say that is the case, because this movie is insane. Like, you have never ever seen anything like this on screen in the history of the medium. Sure, there's films that this is obviously very much inspired by, filmmakers that this is inspired by, stories that this is inspired by in regards to tone and execution. But yet again, this is one of those movies where you're like, the fact that someone actually sat down, conceptualized this, and then painstakingly planned out so many gags within such an absurd and specific concept, it's really crazy to think that this film even exists on its own merit, but it absolutely does. And what's amazing about it too is, you know, this was co-written by Cheslik and Tews. You know, obviously they worked on Lake Michigan Monster before, which I've not seen, but I've heard good things about. I've heard it's not quite as good as this film, but certainly there aren't many people making silent-esque movies anymore. Sure, there's sound effects in it, but it is essentially done mainly in pantomime and is a silent film, as we'd expect from, you know, the veins of those classic filmmakers I mentioned, you know, also Harold Lloyd. Very, very similar vibe to that, but more so Buster Keaton than anything, because what Ryland, Brickson, Tews does in this is truly nothing short of extraordinary. This is really such a committed performance, because not only is he, you know, really committed to the physical gags and the physical humor, and just really draws the comedy out of so many absurd and bizarre situations. It's all done on his face with hardly any dialogue whatsoever, but also he was out in the middle of winter freezing his ass off. I heard he got frostbite making this movie, so this really is a type of level of commitment we don't usually see on screen. And yet again, the fact that this is such a bizarre and wacky performance on top of it, it really makes it stand out as one of the best leading turns of the entire year. Like, he carries this whole movie with just his face and his body and his physical movements, and everything about this is just extraordinary. And also, the level of creativity in this movie is insane. Like, yet again, this movie goes to places you would never expect a movie to go, and yet the film is able to play with such a wide range of very cartoonish and sort of outlandish sort of schemes and plot threads, and, you know, just the way they utilize the cinematic medium to its utmost extent is kind of insane. And yet again, it fleshes out so much creativity that you could have not have had if you were restricted to a more grounded grounded and realistic approach. And the visual effects, I mean, this movie was basically entirely done in post, because a lot of it is green screen effects, and some of it kind of looks bad, but yet again, that's just like watching the trailer. I thought that when the movie actually started, I was laughing my ass off immediately, because they let you know how cartoonish this movie is right from the beginning, with even cartoon characters popping up on screen. And I was immediately hooked into this, and I think it sets its tone so perfectly that the visual effects work more to the movie's benefit than a detriment, because it is so outlandish. It adds a charm to this movie that I think, had the budget been a lot bigger and more polished, it wouldn't have had. And yet again, this was made on a shoestring budget, and the fact that it looks this good, and the fact that there's so much creativity poured into every single frame and every single gag, is truly something we do not see. And so I really commend the team who made this film and all the post-production work on this, because it's truly nothing short of extraordinary. But yet again, the humor in this film really makes it one of the funniest films I've ever seen. Like, for the first 30 minutes of this movie, I was straight belly laughing the whole time. And I usually don't laugh that hard at movies. Sure, there might be a few good gags here or there that I'll get a kick out of. But yet again, this is something that's so unbelievably paced. And yet again, all the jokes, you know, which may seem kind of throwaway at first and just absolutely bonkers and hysterical, actually have a purpose in the narrative. And yet again, it's really building this guy's character and showing what his journey is. It's just a joy to try to watch him put all the pieces together. What is the next move he needs to make to, you know, learn how to survive or get an upper hand on these beavers? And it's just the whole movie him working this out. And yet again, you see this to hysterical effect. And there's so many things I also love about this narrative as well. It almost plays like a video game, because there's this fur trader that he goes to in the movie who he has to bring like a certain amount beavers to trade for certain items, and as the story goes along, there's like a board and there's like more options that are unlocked, so it's very much an RPG in that sense. And yet again, it factors into the narrative so well. The script is so finely tuned and crafted, even though there's hardly a word of dialogue in this entire thing. And then there's a whole thing where the fur trapper has a daughter, and of course there's a romantic love interest there, and of course you can only imagine what else that adds to the movie. But then again, you're not going to predict half of this movie, because this has one of the most outlandish and wildest plot progressions I have ever seen unfold in any movie, let alone comedy. And yet again, the way they are able to utilize trompe-l'oeil and the frame to kind of, you know, trick your eye, or use it to kind of like subvert your expectations of what might happen in the physical realm of the film itself, really just makes us stand out and adds to the wackiness of the world building in this film, because I think the world building here is truly spectacular. And as I said, a lot of these animals that are seen in the film are just people in animal costumes, right? And yet again, like, you actually get legitimate tension out of some of these scenes, especially with the wolves that come into the story. As crazy as these costumes are, as cartoonish as they may seem to be, the narrative still works so well on its own, because it is so well threaded and so well written. And it really, yet again, the way they also use puppetry in this, really some of the most creative use of practical effects I've seen in a long time. And I think, you know, yet again adds a charm to the very cartoonish nature of this film, because as I said, it's billed as a live-action Looney Tunes film, and it really does live up to that title, because yet again, the way things are so exaggerated, it's like watching Wile E. Coyote. As they even said, this is Coyote versus Acme that we'll never get to see. And yet again, if we never get to see that film, as disappointing as that may be, at least we have something as fully realized as Hundreds of Beavers. And they make so many great homages to classic films like Chaplin, but also there's references to Star Wars, but it's never in a way that feels very heavy-handed. It's very subtle, and it's very tasteful, and it's very creative once again, and yet again played up to hilarious effect throughout this entire film. There are so many gags in this movie that on the car ride home, I just kept mentioning, oh, you remember how great that gag was, and that gag, and that one, and it must have been at least 20 that I mentioned, because this movie is an hour and 48 minutes, and I will say, one of my biggest issues with the film, I think after the 30-minute mark, the film does slow down a bit, it gets a little repetitive, but by that third act, oh my goodness, that is one of the wildest and insane and unpredictable third acts I've seen in such a long time, and the chaos that's ensuing on screen only adds to the comedy and just pays off in such a tremendous way that's not only effective for the viewer but also for the characters in the narrative. It really does feel like a complete story, and yet again, I don't know when we're ever going to see a film this creative ever again, and truly this film is one in a million. I don't think we'll ever see a film like Hundreds of Beavers for the rest of time, because this is such a specific film, and what they captured here is truly unbelievable. The slapstick is so well timed, the gags are so well paced, the way, yet again, they utilize the frame to subvert your expectations throughout this entire film. It plays off brilliantly and beautifully and hysterically. I can't say enough good things about Hundreds of Beavers, except that I cannot wait to go back and watch this again. I know it is coming to VOD within the next couple days here, or by the time this video is posted, it might be on VOD already. But yet again, I gotta give it to the crew here for creating something so holistically original that we don't see nowadays in cinemas. And I am so thankful I had the chance to support this film and see it in a theater as it was intended to be shown, because not everyone is going to get that experience. But I really say you have to check out Hundreds of Beavers as soon as possible. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. This score could maybe even go up if I watch it again, now that I know what to expect. Now I know how the plot progresses and how all these threads tie together. Really, you have to see this movie. And just to support, you know, creative films like this made on a shoestring budget, I think it's really inspiring to see this film be able to get a lot of the recognition it has, since it has been making its way through the roadshow screenings that it's been having. And yet again, I can't wait for y'all to see this. But if you have seen this, let me know what you think about Hundreds of Beavers down in the comments below. And of course, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more movie reviews like this in the future. There's going to be quite a few. Of course, I'm going to be talking about Late Night with the Devil, which has been catching a lot of attention lately, and I have quite a few things to say about that film, as well as some others that I may be diving into shortly. Can't say when, but hopefully you'll be seeing quite a few videos from me throughout the rest of this week, and then of course onwards. But yeah guys, until then, take it easy, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Peace out.